Good morning. So we're here today with Coach Keith Cupp, and Keith is the founder and CEO of Gravitas Impact. Gravitas is a worldwide community of premium coaches, seasoned consultants, and experienced CEOs who are building award-winning companies. Keith is previously the president of Gazelles International Coaching Association, where he built over 250 coaches strong in that organization. Keith's business background includes software, home building, telecommunications, retail, and the energy sector. Keith is the author of 7 Attributes of Agile Growth, which I did find my copy this morning so I could refresh myself. Keith is the head coach of Gravitas. Keith coaches personal and business clients for award-winning status, including Best Company to Work For, Inc. 500, and, little wink here, for #1 company to work for in Arizona. So that, I think, trends with some of our past relationship and is very cool. And the last thing I'll mention, Keith is a U.S. Navy veteran who served on the USS Enterprise, and also a little wink and a nod for our veterans relationship. So great to spend some time with you here this morning, Keith.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to be with you here and just have a conversation around a few topics. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So really the context of our conversation today is centered around one-page plans. Mm-hmm. So you and I worked together for over a decade in the business scenario. So I've personally seen the power and the value of a one-page strategic plan in the business sense. You know that for at least the last probably 8 years, I've incorporated a lot of the one-page strategic plan formats and elements into my own life. And I don't say into my personal life, because when I break it down for me, I don't have personal and business. It's just my life. And so I use my personal one-page plan to help guide me. I'd love to have you just reflect a little bit. My audience is not necessarily as familiar with just the one-page format from a business standpoint. If you could just help my audience understand, to start with, what are some of the elements and context, kind of high level, of the one-page plan and how you've executed it at the business level?
Okay, good. Well, I'll give a little bit of kind of thinking philosophy behind the one-page plan. And so when I think about one-page plans for business, we have an old saying that if you can't get your business plan on a single page, one page, you're making it too complex. So kind of the first principle, if you want all of your team members to understand where you're going, you go through the discipline and the hard work of putting your plan on one page. So that's kind of, point number one. Now, when I think about the one-page plan, Jeff, I think of 3 key components. And if we had one in front of us, we'd look at the left side first, and we call that forever. So that's, what is your purpose and what are your core values? Why are you in business? What makes you tick? What are you passionate about? And then what are the characteristics or the behaviors that you want to really be true to, not only to yourself, but all the team members you hire? So that's kind of the left side. The middle is the strategy, okay? Where are you pointed? Why are you doing it? And how are you going to do it? Okay, the elements of strategy, what differentiates you, and some other key points. And then on the far right side is, well, what are you going to do? We call it the execution piece. What am I going to do this year and this quarter to actually execute my strategy quarter over quarter? And so that's how I like to think of it, very, very simply. And then just practically, you build a one-page plan every year for the year. And then every quarter, you take a chunk of the year and you say, how are we going to do this? Who's doing what? You commit to do it. And then you come back next quarter, look at one another and said, did you do what you said you were going to do? Did I do what I said I was going to do? And then you build another quarter.
Outstanding. What would you say is the right amount of, I'm trying to lead the witness here a little bit, the right amount of reflection to the one-page strategic plan? You mentioned obviously that the right side is quarterly objectives. So Is that the right frequency that you recommend?
Yes, and so for looking at and using it with the team, you build it and rebuild it every quarter on the right side. But then with your team, it's good to check in every week and say, "Hey, Jeff, how are you doing on your commitments toward your quarterly priority?" Because we think of a priority for a quarter as a 13-week race. So you take a priority for a quarter that you commit to as a leader or a team member. You break it into weekly legs. It's like running a 440 around a track. And you say, okay, how are we doing each week and how are we doing each month?
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for the high level overview.
Mhm,
So transitioning as the one-page plan to a personal life.
mhm,
And I'd like to ask you, so you mentioned two things on the left-hand side of the plan, even from the business context, being purpose and core values. And those are two big elements that I have on my personal one-page strategic plan is core values. And here's where I want you to go first, is to riff a little bit on core values, because I personally see core values as not only the guidance for myself, and they can be a little bit aspirational, but they're mostly foundational in who we are, or
mhm.
you know yeah, they're essentially who we are. That I really wanted to find out from your perspective. I know you've used the one-page plan with some personal clients. How,
Right.
how do you use the core values element, either in the now, or is there a for the future element that lies within the core values?
Okay. And I'll kind of talk about how we get there as well as how we use them, because it's two sides of a single coin that you've got to look at both sides. So the first side of the coin is core values are so interrelated to your passion and your purpose in life. And so in order to have great core values identified and working well, it's important to understand your core purpose in life. And so, for example, my core purpose in life is building community. And then, so my core values, what are core values around building community for Keith? Things like generosity is very, very important for me. It's who I am to build community. And then also, I have a love for international people, cultures, places, and so on. It's part of our business, but it's deep inside of me from my Navy days when we went around the world and we visited places like Pakistan and France and Australia and so on. Just fell in love with the people. All people everywhere are generally the same. They love one another. They want security and freedom, and to build a business or a family. And so, understanding your purpose and then doing some good journaling work on what your core values are. And again, your core values are something you're very harmonious around that really make you tick in how you behave every day. And I know one little exercise that to find one's core values, ask the people around you that observe you. Hey, Jeff, as you watched me, and we could do this, we won't do it now. I could easily say, Jeff, what have you seen in me over our decade together? And I would, give you a set of sticky notes or, ask you to journal it. So, what are 5 things? You'd come back and you'd probably nail 4 of the 5 things just by observing me for time. So, having a few close family members or friends over the years look into you and say, hey, what do you think makes me tick? That is a really good way to validate what you feel your core values are based on your personal work. And then, putting those into practice practically is you really want to be very crisp and clear on your purpose because it's your North Star where you're going through life. You want to review that regularly, not daily, but come back, weekly or monthly. And then your core values. They're the behaviors and the characteristics of who you are on that journey to where you're going. And the beauty of that, Jeff, too, is if you get off track or if you have a major adversity come your way, a life event, COVID, or if you unfortunately go through a divorce or you lose a parent or whatever, you're so grounded in your North Star where you're going in your core values. Those will help you through on the really, really hard days.
Absolutely. Awesome. And I want to thank you for one other thing there, which is not only did you talk about the core values, but I really like the fact, and that's one thing that I really like to do with my community myself is share
Mhm.
very practical tools that can help somebody achieve any of these specific elements, like the reflection exercise, journaling, reaching out to somebody that you know well that could give you feedback on you. And I think that's awesome. I really appreciate the tools.
Well, and the final, one other thing to add to that is once you feel you have them, share them with two or three close friends that will hold you accountable, encourage you, and remind you through time, especially the hard times. Very, very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And I want to segue a little bit, and you touched on this. It was a micro journey from core values into purpose.
Mhm.
And so now I'm teeing up purpose a little bit more. And here's why. And so I know that you work with, high level businesses, and then you work with high level, typically CEO type
Mhm.
clientele. I'm personally working with, senior level leaders, but I also like to share this information, the one page plan itself, my
Mhm.
kind of day of Zen philosophy. I like to share that, with my peers, with people that work on my teams, just because I believe in the concepts and I found such power. But I also share it with even students. So I'm doing a lot of work with college age students and high school students oftentimes. And regardless, whether it's a college student or like my mid-level managers, this theme of purpose, right, is it's you mentioned it, like the North Star. But if you're speaking to somebody that's not really familiar with either how to find their purpose or what, like the why am I here piece,
Right.
can also seem a little bit like amorphous or like hard to get your arms around. Could you speak to a little bit, like, let's say maybe it is, somebody that's coming out of college or that nature, and I don't know how long it, found you to find that beautiful, international purpose that you have. But for me it came, I would say, much later in life where it really crystallized. So could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. Purpose, Jim Collins has done a lot of work on purpose, of course, and several others. But what I found personally as I've worked with CEOs and done my internal work, purpose is always connected to passion, and passion is an emotion. And so as I've observed people through time, often core purpose lives in the neighborhood of where you're very passionate and emotion will flow when you're in the room with your purpose. Now, for some of us or in life, purpose revolves around where we've been hurt very deeply. And because we've been hurt deeply in life, then we feel the need to have some level of a repair or justice or a purpose around caring for where we've been hurt, or where there's been adversity. And so the first thing I'd say, if somebody said, hey, how should I start about my purpose? I'd say, what really creates emotion in you and gets you fired up in front of you that you would be willing to work for without pay, and in some cases give your life for if you had the opportunity. And then the second place, have you been hurt or damaged or experienced adversity that shaped your life, shaped your heart such that you want to make it right? Okay. And then kind of the third area is, again, observing yourself in the mirror through time and asking others, and then really looking where your time gravitates to. If you just kind of find out where you're spending your time, unstructured time, your purpose is like a magnet. It keeps pulling you in that direction, whether you schedule it or not. So those are kind of the three areas I would encourage, particularly younger people, kind of journal and think about relative to their core purpose. The beauty about being young, you can still shape your purpose, through intent as well as reflection.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. That all just like struck my heart right there. So just that made me think back through my own journey and of many of those different tools that you shared for having found your purpose are the very things that resonated with me as I think back across my journey, like being a construction worker, being like a construction worker that didn't always necessarily work in the safest manner because I'd never really seen the model of that. And
Hmm.
now as I find myself later in my career, I feel like it's my duty, right, to not only
Hmm.
share and lead and raise the bar for my industry, but to help individuals and people work in a safer manner. So anyway, all that was super powerful, again, including the very practical tools.
Hmm. Glad to share. Gray
Yeah.
hair and scars can be powerful
Exactly.
sometimes.
Exactly. Keith, the last question I'm going to ask you about, and we haven't really touched on this one yet, but I think it is really powerful for me on my one-page plan, and it's core competencies.
Right.
And the reason I want to close with reflecting with you on core competencies is one of the things that you've always talked about, you've always encouraged, through our business relationship and personally, is this idea of building your own skills, right?
Mhm.
And so core competencies for me, and I think this is what I recall from our work together. Core competencies are a combination of things that you are good at, working on. There can be an element of aspirational in here where you're and I could be, a little bit confusing that with distinctives, but between the two, I wanted you to just riff a little bit on core competencies, because I'm a
Mhm.
big personal development guy, and I know you are, and I know that's a fundamental piece, that you typically call skill building.
Yes. And so this is great when I've been thinking about this lately too. So when I think of core competencies, I think of native core competencies and then also acquired core competencies. And so I believe, Jeff, in life, we have these native core competencies that may be raw, but they're native to how we're hardwired as individuals. And so, for example, using myself, one is strategy. I didn't realize that strategy and being able to understand and build strategies was a native core competency until I started to go from a CEO to a coach, which I do both, and work with other CEOs as well as with my peers. And I kept finding myself at the intersection of often the right strategy, one step ahead of them. And it was kind of strange. And so that was a native strategy that I then began to work and hone and refine by reading articles by like for Michael Porter and other great strategists. And so think in terms of what is native that you're great at in your work or your life that you just kind of do flawlessly and naturally. And then you can grab that and you can hone it. Okay. Now, this is another example to ask the people around you is, hey, what do you think I do well as I go about my day to day and you watch me? And then journal them out. You ask 3 or 4 people and compare it to your list, you're going to be in the neighborhood of your native core competency. And then flipping the coin over is the acquired core competencies, things that you know that you want to acquire in order to be great as you move towards your purpose with your core values. And so for me, and this is one I just love, is I love interviewing coaches and CEOs. I'm doing a research project right now where I'm interviewing for 90 minutes 50 of the top business coaches in the world. And I did not, do that naturally, but almost after every interview, the coaches are saying, "Man, you interview really well, and that was a lot of fun." And I'm like, "Well, I think that's one that's been honed through time because it hasn't always been that way." In the early days, you get on
Not natural or not native. Yeah.
not native. Yeah, it was like, okay, in order to be a good leader, I need to be able to listen and ask good questions. And those are the two components of a good interview process. And so that's been honed through years and mistakes and errors, and of course, gray hair. But I love doing it now. So that, yes, is an acquired core competency.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your reflection on that as well. Okay. Well, I'm ready to bring us to a close. Any other comments or any other thoughts on any of the subjects we've touched on?
Well, probably the only thing I'd add, Jeff, is I would just the phrase "go for it." Well, Keith, what do you mean by that? I see the majority of people in life not going for it. And what I mean by that, we all have a purpose. We all have been shaped and can choose to build who we are. And sometimes we have to overcome things, and other times we have to seize a dream, write it down, review it daily, and go for it. And so, all that to say, don't settle for second best in life. Grow and test and take steps that may appear risky out of your comfort zone, because it's outside our comfort zone is where we grow and we become great. And great being not ego great, but servant heart great. So go for it, is what I would say.
Fantastic closing message. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me today, Jeff.
So Keith, the couple of attributes that really denote gravitas are both dignity and seriousness, and I would equate seriousness to professionalism. And I can reflect on our relationship now for decade plus, and you really do meet the spirit of both dignity and professionalism. I so appreciate your mentorship over the years. I so appreciate your time on today's conversation. If my audience wanted to find you, or they wanted to find gravitas, they need a good business coach, where should they go?
Well, thanks for that. Real quick, fun comment. If you look at the word gravitas, if you look at it long enough, you'll see the word vita in there. Vita is Latin for life. So gravitas is dignity with life. We have a lot of fun at Gravitas too, and you and I have had a lot of fun through the years. So I don't want to ever lose that. But you can find us at gravitasimpact.com. That's gravitasimpact.com, or just email me at Keith, Keith, at gravitasimpact.com. That would probably be the best couple of ways to reach out. Would love to hear from any listeners that need a little bit of help.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for your time today, Keith.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Keep doing great things, my friend.
Will do.